Hi, my name is Richard Smith, and I'm the author of the book, Such a Mind as This, a biblical theological study of thinking in the Old Testament. And today we have the blessing and indeed privilege to be able to talk with a new friend of mine that God has provided in my life, and that's Osam Temple. And he's the executive director of the International Society of Christian Scholars. So welcome, Osam.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for having me here.
Good. I'm really looking forward to this conversation for many reasons. Let me just start with this so that folks know who you are. Tell us something briefly about yourself, what you've been doing, how you got to where you are today, and how God has been developing your knowledge and your gifts.
Yes, thank you, Richard. I am Osam Temple, as you know. Yes. I come from Cross River State in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And I come from a Christian background. My parents are devoted Christians, leaders of the church. And it's interesting, my father was a leader of the Presbyterian church.
Oh, uh-huh.
He played leadership roles in Presbyterian church. My mother played leadership roles in the Apostolic Church, which is the Pentecostal church. I was privileged to grow with these streams of faith. And interestingly, as a young boy, I was sent to a Catholic boarding school where secondary education. So I spent 5 years of my early years under the tutelage of Catholic priests. And all of this helped me to have a deep thinking about faith. And perhaps a major influence I had growing up was that I was only 3 years old. The Nigerian Civil War started. And it's recorded as one of the most disastrous wars in history. And I believe the period growing up as a child, the kind of questions I asked made me to take life a little more seriously and confront God with questions. Well, that's my background. Went to university and got influenced by Marxists, Marxist thoughts. At that time, Marxist intellectuals are very, very influential in African universities.
Yes.
They captivated us young men. These were people who were concerned, we thought were genuinely concerned about social justice. These were people who analyzed dialectically the problems of society. And we wanted to be like them, okay? So the Marxist influence was very deep, and I wanted to change the situation in my country. Nigeria was under very harsh military governments. But the Lord, because of the background, the Lord continued to convict me. You know, the devil is good at counterfeits.
Yes.
Social justice, love, liberty, equality, these are God's ideals. But now, here were a group of people that were seemingly representing these ideals, but introducing violence, the element of violence and hatred and bitterness. So it didn't sit well with me. Well, later went to do my master's degree and PhD in philosophy in Nigeria's premier university, University of Ibadan. There I read Gandhi's autobiography. This was God's doing, because here I was introduced to social justice from the point of view of nonviolence, and inspired me to set up the Reformers Academy, a nonviolent group that later became very popular in Nigerian universities, and played a very important role in the students' demonstrations of that period that finally made me to leave the country when I fell into trouble with the government. And as an exile in South Korea, I found myself in an evangelical seminary. So it was after my PhD. At that time, I was a professor of philosophy, a lecturer in the Department of Philosophy, University of Ibadan. And now I was an exile in Korea and found myself in the theological seminary for the Master of Divinity degree. So all of this helped me to make a lifelong commitment to serve God, to go into missions. That's the background. Today, by God's grace, I am the president of the Society of Christian Scholars in Africa, and the chair of the executive committee of the Society of Christian Scholars.
And you're currently living in the Middle East, shall we say, attempting to do the work in that area of the world as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's right.
That's exciting. It's exciting. Let me begin then with a question, because it seems to me one passion you have, or perhaps a controlling passion, aside from your desire to glorify Christ and extend the kingdom and so forth, is to love God with the mind and to develop the mind for God's glory. And I've heard you've mentioned on several occasions, or heard you express your passion that Christian intellectuals, Christian thinkers, Christian academics in particular, come to see their work, their gifts as a calling. So can you expand on that? Why are you passionate about that? Why do you think that is the case? And why should Christian thinkers, I'll keep the term broad, embrace loving God with the mind as a calling, or in particular, their work as a calling?
Just two words: meaning and purpose.
Okay.
When they work as a calling, it gives meaning and purpose to whatever they do in the universities, in their institutions. See, everybody is created with a purpose. All of us are created with a purpose. And it is that purpose that gives meaning to what we do, brings passion to whatever we do. And the Christian intellectual spends most of his time in the workplace. I mean, all of us spend a lot of our time in the workplace.
Yes.
The nature of the work of the Christian intellectual, it is day and night. You are dealing with research. You don't take a break. Even when you are sleeping, that's what's
yes.
business. And so it doesn't make sense if a Christian intellectual doesn't see their work as a calling. This is so important. If they don't understand their work as a calling, I believe it becomes an abdication of responsibility. If they hand over the intellectual and cultural narratives to strangers, enemies of the faith, They will not understand why they are in the universities. They will lose sight of the bigger picture and therefore miss the opportunity to mentor future generations. They will miss the opportunity to partner with God to save the world, to save the world from reckless ideologies, reckless thoughts. If they don't see their being in the university as a call from God,
yes,
I think that would be a tragedy, actually, because rationality, they are gifted with rationality. And rationality without accountability is dangerous to our world. And so we as Christian intellectuals are positioned to interrogate the ideas that fuel the world of commerce, the world of business, the world of politics, the world of religion. We are positioned to interrogate these ideas. We are positioned to be midwives of the ideas that will rule the future world, the world of our dreams. So if a Christian scholar doesn't say this, his or her being in the university as a calling, that it's just, they miss all of these opportunities to contribute. And what would happen is that they will betray their purpose, they will betray their mission, and they can't bring out the best out of themselves. And that, for me, is a tragedy. So it's so important, very important.
So to change the question another way, then you would say that it is possible to be highly educated, but yet, from the biblical point of view, be a fool, or to be very highly educated and still not love God with the mind. Would that be a fair implication of what you're saying?
Yes. Why is that possible? Why? Theologies that diminish the role of reason, cultural attitudes that separate faith from thought, and very importantly, fear. Why do they? Why would they not say their calling in spite of their advanced education?
Right.
It is fear of who they are, not God. Fear that if they subject their faith to critical rationality, to rational thinking, then they may lose their faith. So it's insecurity. So because of the cultures and the theologies, Christian academics unfortunately begin to be afraid to their faith to see the very important duties they have in academia. And so it's unfortunate. Yeah.
Okay. Can we narrow it down now? And can you help us to understand where are the fault lines? Where are the points of contact or conflict in Africa for a Christian intellectual? In other words, where are the worldview conflicts? Where they manifest? Where are the battles that need to be engaged in that particular cultural, theological, religious, intellectual context, which we call Africa? And of course, that may be too broad, so maybe we should say Nigeria. But I'll leave it to you to generalize and particularize as you think you should.
Yeah, the Christian scholar in Africa has a lot of work to do. See, I am speaking to you now in the language of the colonialist.
Yeah.
And so I think through the concepts that were acquired. And for the Christian intellectual, they find themselves in a world where they interrogate their faith through Western concepts, and it's interesting. Africa did not pass through the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, but Africa inherited the problems of the Renaissance, the problems of the Enlightenment. And when you place this in the cultural context of Africa, which is a spiritually vibrant environment, an environment of communalism, human relations. So you get caught in this world that separates faith and reason. Whereas for me, faith and reason is not a problem.
Right.
I think if I will use the Cartesian phrase, he says, therefore I exist. I would say I believe, therefore I exist. Okay.
Right.
There is this intermingling in the cultural system of spirituality and physicality. So we shouldn't have had problems, but theologies that came from the West, and yes, the Western missionaries did a great thing, and God used them to bless us. But it's our responsibility now to be Christians, but with an African conscience.
Right.
Okay? So that we can address the real issues of faith in our context. It's important for us to deconstruct concepts that were inherited. Otherwise, so many things will neglect a lot of issues that are truly African. So decolonization begins from the mind. We need a genuine African response to the theories that are in the academia that contradict our faith and our cultural contexts.
Right.
The African physicist does not have to buy the theory of evolution.
Right.
We have where we are, we have enough resources to resist scientism, higher criticism, and all that. So we need a genuine African response. Our approach has to be different. So the arguments and approaches of our intellectual disciplines can be interrogated from the point of view of faith based on our context. And I think that will help us to enrich the thought systems in the world.
And that brings me to my for me, the most interesting question, and probably one of our last, would be, I understand that you are developing now with your colleagues a program, I guess you would call it a reorientation educational program, to do that kind of decolonization, deconstruction, and as well as construction, positively speaking. Can you describe a little bit? I mean, I know from what I understand, excuse me, it's in development, but what are you thinking at this time, and what are you hoping that would come of it?
Yes, thank you, Richard. That is what we call Program 500.
Okay, good.
It's an ambitious program, and we just believe in God to help us. It is an initiative to identify and train 500 Christian academics within a period of 5 years.
That's a big vision. Yes.
I don't know how we are going to do it, but believe in God. It's a deliberate plan to equip Christian academics, emerging African Christian academics, to equip them to have the relevant skills to interrogate their culture and to influence the thought systems of the world from a biblical perspective.
Yes.
This program will create a community of scholars, a community of scholars that are prepared spiritually and intellectually to define and articulate and defend the Christian faith from the African biblical perspective. So this program is an opportunity for academics to think through their faith and the challenges they face. It's an opportunity for African scholars to seek God's truths within their disciplines.
Yes.
Opportunity to train ourselves to flood the intellectual space with publications. African Christians, we want to develop a healthy response to negative theologies, the old David Hume's empiricist tradition that has influenced much of the world. And many times we just imbibe things and accept things in different parts of the world, and we don't really know the struggles of that time. Why these concepts came. I believe that what happened in the West was that Christian intellectuals at a point surrendered the narrative.
Yes.
To different hordes of logical positivists. People say that these people say that what cannot be verified scientifically cannot be true.
Right.
They say it's nonsensical. It's meaningless. Logical positivists like Aya would say that if a statement is not empirically verifiable, that statement is meaningless.
Right.
How can that be true? People like Bertrand Russell, intelligent people, could subscribe to theories like, by the way, I was their follower at a point when in my philosophy classes, I did my master's thesis on logical atomism. And many times I wondered, how could such an intelligent person not believe that there are things that cannot be verified or are empirically unverifiable, like moral propositions, for instance, propositions. So they succeeded to hold captive a significant and influential part of our civilization. And because we did not engage them, Christian academics did not really come out to engage them and continue their traditions no matter what.
Yes.
What happened was that they influenced cultures, influenced science, and then as they went to the rest of the world, this was the standard. They set up the template of today's intellectual traditions. And so I believe that having program 500, we're trying to raise a group of scholars that will work with other scholars in other parts of the world, our brothers in the West and in the East, and a response
Mm-hmm.
and help shape
Mm-hmm.
the civilization of the future,
Mm-hmm.
and bring back God
Mm-hmm.
into the center of things. Because
Yes.
the world we have it today is messed up.
Messed up, yes.
When reason cannot submit to a creator, then reason goes wild.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what.
Good. And if I hear you correctly, then what you're struggling with, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the imposition of ungodly forms of thinking, and ungodly structural forms in terms of economics, politics, and so forth, and education that were forced upon you by those who colonized Africa, and that what you're seeking now to try to do is equip your Christian scholars with the interpretive skills and the discernment to know what is good, what is evil, what is positive, what is negative. Or maybe another way to put it, you want to redefine what human flourishing means.
That's right.
The West imposed it upon you, and in many ways has robbed your world of its inherent and intrinsic aspects of flourishing. And then, of course, you want to purify that further, I suppose, by further biblical teaching. Would that be a close to a fair assessment of what you've been saying?
That's a fair assessment, except that it would be unfair to say the West imposed it on me.
Mm-hmm.
The unchristian West,
Right,
imposed it on the world,
right,
because they don't know that what they are promoting is ideology, an ideology from a cultural context that tells everybody who doesn't accept, even in the West, who doesn't follow their template, to shut up. That's basically what's happening. It's the dominance of a culture, and it may be even a minority, even in the West.
Yes.
But when they take control of the universities, they take control of critical institutions, the economic sector, the banking system, then they make it seem as godly, everything that comes from that culture. Everything about capitalism is good. They make capitalism godly.
Right.
And forget the competition, fierce competition, and forget about the ethical issues in capitalism.
Yes.
They forget about the exploitation. They forget about the wide gap between the rich and the poor. It's all over the world. But if we could be more discerning, that's why I like the word you use, discerning. We can be able to detangle, to decouple some of these things and take what is good, because all truths are God's truths.
Right.
What is good came from God. So if we embrace these truths, we are representing God. It's not a particular culture. It's God's system. But the devil has a way of bringing out counterfeits from the original. Right. We are dealing with counterfeits now.
Right. Well, the devil's the ultimate obscurant. In other words, what's the word? Obfuscation. Yes. If he can confuse and muddle, then certainly he will do that. And of course, if he can cause Christians to use words that are actually biblical, stupid and irrelevant, then that suits his purposes. Well, just let me finish with these two practical questions. What do you need for your program to pull it off in terms of, one, prayer and resources? What would be helpful for you in those two areas? And we'll finish with that.
We need prayer.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of prayer. We ourselves do a lot of prayer.
Yes.
We don't move anything in the physical world without going to the secret place.
Yes.
It's in the secret place that we have the impetus to act in the physical.
Yes.
When we go there, then we are believing God to provide partners, people who will help us with developing the ideas, resources. Although this is a program for primarily for African Christian scholars, but we are not we operate in the world, so there's so many experts out there in universities in the West, in the East, who can partner with us. We want to have a planning committee that's international, so that we brainstorm and exchange ideas. Okay. Then we also would need institutional partners.
Right.
Because while we are just starting, we will have to operate with, the program is going to be 3 months online.
Okay.
And we're going to invite professors who want to register in the program. 3 months online. We're going to study the same kind of literature, discuss and exchange ideas. Then later in the year, we're going to have 3 months residential program.
Good.
Where people will come as a retreat. That is where we're going to develop, have spiritual development, leadership training, and writing. So that time a set of scholars are leaving that program, they would have something to publish, something to tell the world.
That's excellent.
So we will need resources in terms of institutional partners that can accept us to run from their facilities for a while. And we also need, would want, the technology is important.
Yes.
And then financial resources, of course, to pay the bills.
Sure. So, okay, that's very, very good. All right. Well, may God use this conversation to further that vision. I certainly hope so. And I'm very excited about it. And I think that it probably is, indeed, I'm sure it is, replicable in one form or another in other regions of the world. And so you're creating a template, a model. It'll be interesting to see in the next 5 to 10 years what happens. Perhaps here in South America, we can organize a program that's similar to that someday, and we'll be coming to you for consultations and advice about how to do it. So that will be excellent. Okay, so let me say goodbye to you, and bless you in the Lord, that you will accomplish all that He's laid on your heart to do. Amen.
Thank you, Richard. Oh. Amen. God bless you.
Okay, bye-bye.